User interfaces. They were so cool and quirky and unique, and then what happened?
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no.
Apps and websites all look basically the same today. Everything is so bland, boring and lifeless. But it wasn't always like this. I mean, have we forgotten how to do this? Well, as it turns out, there's a very specific reason why all of this happened. But I have another, even more important question. Can we get out of this and make tech cool again? Well, yes. And actually, it's happening already. Because you see, the way our things look is never random. There's always a reason why. The aesthetic of the 1960s, of futuristic Jetsons space age filled with optimism about technology and a nuclear-powered car for whatever reason, was a reflection of an actual, real space age. And the same thing is behind things like Fruitiger Aero, the 2000s style of bubbles and blue skies and aquariums that for some weird reason now is back into culture as a nostalgia thing. Well, it was a sign of what was happening at the time. Computers and the internet were becoming mainstream. Before, computers were a thing for nerds and programmers. They were scary and intimidating gray boxes. For the average person that never used a computer or accessed the internet, they looked scary. And so they made tech anti-scary. Out were the gray boxes and in were colors and playfulness. User interfaces started to add in visuals that remind of calm nature, like bubbles, glassy effects, and the famous Windows XP hills. Apple's design language at this time was called Aqua, with these watery-looking buttons. And for some reason, everyone just really liked aquariums. But before all this, well, user interfaces were actually also minimal and boring. And not because they wanted to match the minimalist desk setup they saw on YouTube, but because they just couldn't do anything else. In the 80s and 90s, user interfaces looked gray. Maybe darker gray here, dotted gray there, maybe the occasional blocky color, but technology was limited. I remember my first computer could display only 256 colors on the screen, and it had the same resolution that my Mac now has in this amount of screen. So when technology caught up and we could finally go crazy, oh boy, we went crazy. This was the time of crazy skins and themes, and it's not just computers. My first smartphone was an HTC sensation, and it had this interface on top of Android called Sense. Phones just became powerful enough to allow fancier UI, and so you had 3D elements flying on the screen. To unlock the phone, you had to take this metal ring and pull it up and it would fly in your face. This was the menu for the original Xbox. And making this takes way more time than one of those minimalistic UIs we see today. So what was the reason for doing this? Well, because they can. These cool interfaces are a celebration of how technology has caught up with creativity. And now they could do all the things that could just imagine doing a few years back. And sometimes they pushed this too far. When Windows Vista was released, it had all these cool effects and 3D windows, but it was extremely slow and too heavy because of all these visual effects they introduced. This was the golden age of personalization, of skins, of themes, of giving people the option to customize and tweak and just go crazy. We had all this. It was wild, it was colorful, and yeah, it was sometimes excessive or cringe, but it was undoubtedly cool, and I kind of miss it. Because afterwards, everything went boring. Minimalism, flat design, whites and grays, websites started to look all the same. Apps started to look all the same. Customization is gone, and today you're lucky if you even get a dark mode. And there's actually 3 key things to blame for this. And the first one is called usability. This is the cockpit of the space shuttle, and this is the one from the new SpaceX Dragon capsule. One feels like you need 10 years of training, the other one makes you feel like, yeah, I can pilot this. Usability is the science of making something complex, easy, and understandable, and you can immediately feel if something has great usability or not. The best products just feel good, and they feel intuitive. You don't need a manual. And on the other side of the spectrum, there's things like this. This is the website I used to apply to the tourist visa to India a few months back, and it was one of the most atrocious things I ever had to go through in my life. But usability is scientific. You measure how much time people take to complete an action and where they click. And that's when the cool bells and whistles get in the way. If you put this interface against this other one and you measure which one is more understandable for users, which one do you think is gonna win? So over time, things became more simple, more innocuous, more approachable, but also more boring and lifeless. And you can see this even in the small things, like how Spotify got rid of the heart to add a song to your library in favor of this aesthetic plus icon. And don't get me wrong, usability is great. I mean, I work for a company that makes the tools to test usability of tech products. But over time, we chipped away pixel by pixel at all the little touches that made technology just a tiny bit cooler or a tiny bit weirder. We've made things simpler, that's great, but we've also made them boring. But all of this still doesn't explain why almost every website and app looks basically the same. Well, this is the fault of design patterns. Why do you think most websites use the exact same way of displaying options with this hamburger menu? Or why most apps have this bottom bar that works in the exact same way, with home on the left, main action in the center, and your profile on the right? Well, because humans are creatures of habit. We get used to things, so once a design is established, anything that deviates from it just looks off. And the more time passed, the more design patterns got implanted in the minds of billions of people. They get specific names and their behavior gets standardized across apps. These are chips, and you can use them when you have a list of multiple attributes. This is called an accordion. This is a drop-down menu. Even the action of vertically scrolling videos and double tapping to like that you see in social media is a design pattern. And of course, they evolve over time. Apple just presented a new hybrid between tabs and sidebar in iPadOS, effectively creating a new design pattern. But eventually, these things become rules. And except playing with some colors, you pretty much need to stick to the rule. This is why one of my favorite guilty pleasures is going on Twitter, X, and find designers that experiment with new and weird and innovative design patterns. Yeah, I know, I got weird hobbies. And finally, let's not forget the last reason why everything went plain, which is that people caught up to technology. Back in the day, you had to make technology less scary and more approachable. This is the Frutiger Aero aesthetic, but it's also the first versions of iOS, where you had textures and a newsstand app that looked like an actual bookshelf. You had fabrics, you had things that resembled the real world, a notepad that looks like a real notepad. And they did this to make this new unusual device more similar to the physical objects that people were already used to. But eventually, people caught up. They didn't need their notes app to look like a notepad anymore. A black screen was fine. Things got simpler and more conceptual. This is what drove the big redesign of iOS with iOS 7, where everything became flat and simple. Or Windows Phone. Does anyone remember Windows Phone? But in the process, we lost the things that were just plain cool. I mean, look at the animation they built for the old iPhone wallet app when you delete a ticket. Completely over the top, completely unnecessary, but it was just cool. They took away the unnecessary. But sometimes, the unnecessary is what makes things beautiful.
This is my hometown in Italy, and there's detail. The houses have all these little things next to the doors and the windows, and there's plants, and it's all these unnecessary things that make this beautiful. This, on the other hand, well, there's nothing unnecessary, but it's ugly, it's boring, it's not as cool.
But in making these videos, I realized that so many small things that seem unnecessary actually matter a lot. Because in each video like this one, there's hundreds of little decisions and secrets, and I'm revealing all of these inside Story Behind. Each story behind is a practical, hands-on breakdown of how my most successful YouTube videos were actually made. All the storytelling decisions, the little tricks, the editing, the packaging, the why behind each small or big decision. This is not a YouTube course. There's no theory, there's no bullet points, there's no secret formula for success. If you're a creator or you want to become a creator, this is an inside look at exactly how a successful video is built. You can check out Story Behind at the link below, and there's also a discount code valid for the first 20 people that use it that allows you to get Story Behind at the lowest price you will ever be able to get it at. But what happens when we go to the complete other direction? What if we didn't care about usability and we could just build user interfaces for the sake of being just incredibly cool? Well, we don't have to wonder. We know, thanks to a small thing called science fiction. User interfaces in movies and TV shows are built only for the purpose of aesthetics, vibes, and matching with the tone of the story that we're trying to tell. And it doesn't matter if they are impractical in real life. I mean, controlling stuff like in Minority Report is cool, but imagine replying to emails all day with an interface like this. The head-up display for Jarvis in the Iron Man movies is part of what makes Iron Man, well, Iron Man. And it doesn't matter if most of these elements are completely unnecessary. If you pause and and look at the cockpit of an X-Wing from Star Wars, or the ship from The Mandalorian. There are unlabeled buttons, there are visuals that need to look otherworldly but somehow still familiar to what they do. Same thing for this concept art from Blade Runner. Territory Studio is a VFX house that specializes in making these user interfaces for sci-fi movies and TV shows. And if there's one thing that I got from looking at how these are made, is that this is art. And these artistic elements is something that I think we have kind of lost in the UI and products we use today. And this art, which is not constrained by technical limitations and politics and having to, really build the thing, it's what ends up shaping the tech that actually changes the world. This is Rainbow's End, an amazing sci-fi novel about a world where augmented reality is everywhere. And it's actually one of Mark Zuckerberg's recommended reads. And inspired by this, he's now working to build this for real by investing in VR and AR. Science fiction inspires us as children, and some of these children grow up with a desire to transform that sci-fi fantasy into a reality. And it doesn't need to be the crazy world-changing tech. The founder of Uber got the inspiration from the live map, where you can see the car's live location, from the movie 007 Goldfinger. And so, will we ever go back to making tech cool again? Well, yes, and it's actually already happening. The Rivian R1 team for Tailspin system is using Unreal Engine to make these cool visualizations of the truck in this shaded anime style. We are at the point where making software and interfaces that are functional is becoming easier and easier. So now, making things cool is a way to stand out. Bringing beauty and craft to your product is a way to differentiate yourself from the competition. I've talked about Arc Browser in the past, and by inventing new design patterns like the swipeable sidebar for different profile, or by allowing people to finally go crazy again with color pickers and customization options, well, they are making their browser unique versus all the others that look the same. But sometimes what matters is not to be flashy. You can be simple and understated, but add in the craft and beauty with something called micro-interactions. Small touches that most people don't even notice, but that subconsciously make a difference. And when you notice them, you cannot unnotice them. Airbnb is great at this, like this animation to show photos of available properties. Another mind-bending one is one with the new iPads and Apple Pencil that now supports rotation of the pencil. So not only you see a preview of your stroke, if you look closer, there's a virtual shadow of the tool you're using that dynamically adapts to how you move the pen. It's not flashy, but I dare you say it's not just cool. I think we leaned even too much on excessive minimalism and excessive simplicity, and now we are kind of rebounding in the other direction. Because for how much we want things to be minimalistic and simple, as humans, we crave beauty and craft. And even if most people don't think about tech this way, I think there's art behind these things we use every day. But what happens when tech goes too far? When people get to the point of hating being on their phone, what happens when smartphones will become uncool? Well, you can learn all about it in this video right here. I'm Enrico, and I'll see you in the next one.